Hi ladies, Dionysia here. I had an impulse today to sit down and chat with you a bit about my experiences of Greece and specifically my first time going there. There's so many different sacred places and sacred sites in the world that we can visit for pilgrimage, for transformation, for growth. So why Greece? Why go there? And why do I go there again and again? So my first time in Greece, I was quite young. I was my daughter, who's just had her 25th birthday a couple of days ago. She was 6 at the time. So what's that, 19, 20 years ago, right around. And I went because I had such a profound calling to go there. I was already on my priestess path and had been for some time. And I had, been in getting strong in ceremony, getting strong in personal ritual, really delving deep into the mysteries and the mystery schools of the past and the various spiritual traditions of the world. And the Greeks really grabbed me. And actually, predating that, I was pretty obsessed with Greek mythology even as a child. Like, I can remember being 7 and 8 years old. Do any of you remember that film Clash of the Titans from way back then? This would have been, 45 years ago. Is that true? Yeah, I guess so. Wow, it's really such a trip to speak about myself in terms of decades, but here we are. And it had that little mechanical owl of Athena's that would sit on Perseus's shoulder or come visit him in a tree. Anyways, I don't know if you remember that, but I was obsessed with it. I watched it again and again and again. So my whole sort of relationship to the Greek gods and goddesses began quite early in my life, even though I grew up in a very small town in South Alabama in the Bible Belt. I grew up Southern Baptist and lots of evangelism and all kinds of things that were the spiritual, religious sort of tide of the time, right, in those areas. So despite all of that, Greek mythology had grabbed me. And so for my first trip to Greece, I was traveling with a woman who is one of my oldest friends, and she was my closest friend at the time, and her husband and their daughter, who was 3 or 4 years older than my daughter and my boyfriend at the time. So we were 2 couples and 2 young girls. And we had a month and we spent 2 weeks in Italy and 2 weeks in Greece. And while we were in Greece, I was first in Athens and then I went to Delphi. And I had such a profound need to get to Delphi. And it was, for me, it was part remembrance and part things I had been reading or learning in my priestess path, but just I had such a driving desire to go there. I wanted to go speak to the oracle. And I had so many people say to me, the oracle is dead. The oracle's long been dead. You're not going to get anything from the oracle at Delphi. It's not there anymore. And I thought, well, we'll see. So I did go to Delphi and I did go to the oracle there and I brought offerings and made offerings to her and then I prayed and she was so loud and clear and immediate. I didn't have to wait for her to come. I didn't have to try to hear something. I've always been, one of my gifts has been clairaudience, so I hear quite easily when spirit speaks to me. And she said, clear as a bell, very directly, let go of the past and live in the now. And it wasn't trite, and it wasn't cliche, and it wasn't an overused sentiment in any kind of way. It had a power behind it that was so clear. And that led on to an experience when I got back to California where I was living at the time. And I'll get to that in a moment. But from Delphi, I went back to Athens and then to Crete. And on Crete, we landed in Hania, which is one of the port towns. And then we went up into the mountains and we made our way around. We were driving a van and ultimately went to Knossos. So we were in Heraklion and we went to Knossos. And when I first stepped on the ground at Knossos, I don't know how much any of you might know about this, but Knossos was built from mica. And if you know what mica is, it's sort of a soft, flaky kind of stone. It comes off in almost like scales or shales, and it's beautiful. It glitters. It's glittery and it shimmers in the sun. So Knossos was built of mica, and you can find little fragments of it on the ground in various places there, and which meant that the palace would have shimmered in the sun. And I stood on the ground and could just see all of it. I could see where our altars would have been, where our sleeping arrangements were. I saw where we kept the serpents that we danced with and communed with and used for prophecy. I saw where we went to bleed. I saw women in their daily work and men in their daily work moving about the palace. Like all of it just sort of constructed itself in front of me when I was there. And all of this was happening while I really didn't know. I was quite young still. I like I said, was on my priestess path, but I was in a lot of exploration. I was still really learning who I was as a priestess. And I had come across the Cretan snake goddess, and it just resonated so powerfully for me that it was sort of part of my journey along the way, right? So then getting to Knossos and being where we had been there and having it be so profound for me really lit up some things for me. There are some really tremendous books that I would recommend to you. If you have any fascination whatsoever about Crete, Knossos, Minoan culture, I do recommend Ode to Manoa. It's a fantastic read, Ode to Manoa. But beyond that, there is another really wonderful book. It's called The Lineage of the Codes of Light. And in this book, the author traces a lineage of priestess through time, from one civilization to another, to another, to another. And she talks about how it moves through the women of time to stay alive, actually. And she talks in there about, you know, what the priestesses of Crete were doing, what the light codes were. And so for me, when I was standing on the grounds of Knossos and having this experience, I really felt like codes of light got lit up in me. So many of you know me through the mystery school as the sexuality and intimacy mentor, and that is true. But what you might not know about me is the tremendous background that I have in spiritual traditions and spirituality, and especially women's wisdom and feminine spiritual traditions, including many types of shamanism and relationship to the other world, relationship to spirit, and how we hear, see, sense, all of our, you know, extra sensory perceptions. And so I'm quite versed in those things and bring a lot of that to my clients for sure in one-on-one sessions, and my ability to see, but also in taking women on these amazing retreats that we go on, what I can help women to see for themselves and see about themselves and discover for themselves. Many of the women who journey with me have some of those abilities or gifts lit up in them already. Others are wanting that, and they find that through being on these kinds of retreats. So for me, that moment at Knossos, after that moment at Delphi, were so profound for sure, but also enlightening, like lighting up things in me and helping me feel true to myself. There was an era of time in the early days of my priestess path where I really questioned whether I could walk with that title, whether I could carry it. It was unusual in the world, even more so, you know, 20, 30 years ago than it is now. And I I was hesitant, quite hesitant in the beginning of walking my path and claiming that title and all that it carries and all that it means, because it carries a lot of the lineage, right? It carries a lot of what has happened to the priestesshoods over time, including the priestesshoods of Greece. And those are the kinds of things that we will talk more deeply about on this retreat. But to move forward from there, just to go on about, my relationship to Greece, well, I will say I was in love with it, all of it, in love with it, completely in love with it. I couldn't get enough of it. And then coming back to Mount Shasta, California, where I was living at the time, I was disturbed. Things were just stirred up in me. And the man who was my partner at the time was in a mystery school where he was studying, and he suggested that I go and have a session with the woman who carried that lineage, that mystery, which was Pleiadian. So I did. I went and had a session with her. And in that session, she said to me, "Oh, you have such tremendous lifetimes in Greece." And almost the entire session was about what happened to me personally, my soul being, when the marauders came and took down the temples, and how that had been moving in time with me since then. So we cleared that, healed that, sewed that up, sealed that up, so that became part of my past, so that I could live in the now. And I knew then that that's what the oracle was talking to me about. When I landed in Greece, I had been really grieving a lot about, I was so immersed in women's studies and all that has happened in women's history on our planet, and particularly under the boot of the patriarchy, that I still was really wrestling with that in my being and in my mind, like how to want to be here, how to embrace this life now. And given what happened in that session when I got back to Mount Shasta, I understood that that's what the oracle was saying to me. She was saying, let that go, let that past go. And I did that by really turning towards that past and seeing what it had been and doing some very deep healing around it, so that I can live in the now. And not only like live life, be here, have a good life, that, yes, of course, but also be priestess now. Who am I as a powerful woman? Who am I as a priestess in this lifetime? So while, again, like I shared with you, I'm quite versed at looking into past lives, looking into the other realms and in the other worlds, I also am really committed. I am Taurian through and through to being grounded here, being on this earth plane, bringing things into manifestation here in physical reality. So that was a pivotal point for me, that whole thing about what the oracle had to say to me, my experience on Crete, and then coming back to that session that sort of tied the whole thing up really nicely. Fast forward, it was almost 20 years later. Oh, one key piece about what happened my first time on Crete was that the friend that was with me, the woman friend of mine, who's also very psychic, she said to me, I see you leading groups of women back here. Because we had been talking about what kinds of things we had led with women and done with women when we were there in past lives. And she said, I see you bringing groups of women here in this life. And that first happened 2 years ago. So many of you might remember that I took a group of women from her mystery school to Crete. And at that time, I only offered it to the school for a specific reason. We were going to this priestess convocation. It was the first one that had been held. I knew it was going to be a week of beautiful but also intensive ceremony, and it was amazing. And this time I really wanted to open this trip out further to more women, because that priestess convocation is incredible for anybody who's, like I've said, priestess curious or priestess adjacent, or been on the path for a long time, in that it's women's ceremonies for days and days, and on this incredible land that holds so much ceremony for centuries. So that 2 years ago was the first group of women that I've taken there, and it was tremendous. It was amazing. And so I'm very excited now to be going again. For me, Greece, Athens, Crete especially, but Greece itself holds so much of our psyche. You know, the Greeks were the first gods and goddesses to be fully human. All of the gods and goddesses in religions up to that point were part human, part animal, right? Think about the Egyptian Nitaru or the Indian gods and goddesses of Hinduism. Like, they all have parts, right? The Greek gods and goddesses were the first to be all human. And therefore, they really take up something in our psyche, how we are created by them and represented by them, and we are the image of them. Now, this all predates, obviously, the one God of the Abrahamic religions, but just to say that we can see so much of ourselves and who we are by studying the archetypes of the Greek gods and goddesses. And in this particular retreat, we're going to be focusing on Athena. So Athena kind of gets a bad rap sometimes because she's so powerful, like many powerful women do, right? But she's also strategic and wise. And I think to navigate the times that we're in right now requires us to be strategic and wise. We are going to go to Knossos and do the snake goddess piece again, because it is so potent and so powerful. And again, serpent in our psyche and what that represents as representative of the great goddess across all of the ancient cultures of the ancient world. We're going to be talking about that on this retreat as well. But the point of what we're doing on this pilgrimage is walking the path of powerful woman. Who are you as a powerful woman? What do you feel needs to be bolstered in you or strengthened in you for you to really be owning your full power? Many of us as women don't do that, and we don't do it for very good reason. And what happened to the priestesses in those priestesshoods is a big part of that reason. So the fact that those gods and goddesses are so powerful in psyche, and that we do have a chance in Greece to go and work with Athena and with the snake goddess, that's a big part of the reason that I continue to go back there. Not only that, I love the culture. I love the food. I love the people. It's going to be warm in October. We're going to get to swim. It's going to be beautiful. It's just strikingly beautiful, but also the power in the land there that comes from people having communed with these gods and goddesses for centuries is vibrant. It's palpable. You can draw from it. You can power up from it. So this pilgrimage really is about going to honor the gods and goddesses there, specifically these two that we're working with, and go into ceremony. That week of Priestess Convocation is a powerful ceremonial week. It's going to give us a lot of opportunity for awakening and reclaiming parts of ourselves. So this is it. This is what it is to walk the path of powerful woman. We get together, we go on pilgrimage, we get into ceremony, we speak to the gods and the goddesses, and we reclaim aspects of ourselves. Throughout all of that, we have respite. We take some real breaks and some real time to rest, to go inward, to be with ourselves or be with each other, be in sisterhood.